This show is a part of the Hillsdale College Podcast Network. If you like what you hear, please subscribe to your favorite. You'll get brand new episodes of all your favorite shows sent right to your device, and you'll help us know that you're out there listening. Never miss another episode by going to podcast.hillsdale.edu/subscribe. That's podcast.hillsdale.edu/subscribe. Or click the follow or subscribe button on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or YouTube.
Welcome to the Hillsdale College K-12 Classical Education Podcast, bringing you insight into classical education and its unique emphasis on human virtue and moral character, responsible citizenship, content-rich curricula, and teacher-led classrooms. Now your host, Scot Bertram.
Thanks for listening. The Hillsdale College K-12 Classical Education Podcast is part of the Hillsdale College Podcast Network. More episodes at podcast.hillsdale.edu or wherever you get your audio. You also can find more information on topics and ideas discussed on this show at our website, k12.hillsdale.edu. We're joined by Jenny Mulvey. She is a fourth grade teacher at Golden View Classical Academy in Colorado, also has worked with Hillsdale's K-12 office in a variety of capacities. Jenny, thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Talking today about how to maintain a rich and well-ordered classroom. Always like to define terms first. How would you tell us about what a well-ordered classroom means in the context of classical education?
If you had asked me that question my first year of teaching, my response probably would have been a silent one. I think that a lot of people have this vision, as I myself did, of classical education being teacher in the front, students doing nothing but eagerly listening to every word that the teacher has to say, and then maybe raising their hands to sprinkle in a question of their own or to answer a question of mine here or there. And what I have come to find is that is a way to kill classical education if your classroom is just stone silent all day. If you walk into my classroom now, just having finished my 7th year of teaching, you might hear a lot of different things. Mm-hmm. You might see students in groups poring over a science experiment that we're doing and sharing observations. You might see students engaged in a lively, intense debate over whether Robin Hood is ultimately a virtuous or unvirtuous leader. There's a lot more talking and what you might initially think is noise in my classroom when you first walk in. Because what I've learned about what a well-ordered classroom for classical education means is one where all of my students are actively pursuing learning something new. And that is a very exciting endeavor, and it should be a very lively endeavor. Now, what my classroom is not, is it's not rowdy. It's not rambunctious. My students need to learn that in order to pursue something new, there has to be a focus involved. Mm-hmm. So that means that they are respectful. They're respectful to me as the teacher. I'm the one who's going to ultimately guide the ship to them arriving at the knowledge that I need them to learn. And so they need to respect and listen to me. They need to respect each other and listen to each other. That means that they should neither hog the conversation the entire time, nor should they sit back and be silent and just listen to what those around them have to say. They need to raise their hand because the contributions of their classmates are important, and they need to listen to and think about and respond to what their classmates say. It means when we're walking through the hallways, we are walking silently because those in the classrooms around us are pursuing knowledge, and we need to respect that and not be a distraction to them in their important work. So to me now, a well-ordered classroom is one where my students are engaged in learning something new. And I've learned that that can take a couple of different forms, and it's not always silent.
What role does the physical environment play in all this? Seating, lighting, decor, what goes into a classroom?
Yeah. One of my biggest pet peeves is when I walk into a classroom and it kind of looks like Hello Kitty threw up in there. I've been in classrooms where just every square inch of every surface is covered in something, whether it be colorful pom-poms hanging from the ceilings, or whether there are so many anchor charts of things that the students have studied that they become no longer helpful because they're just overwhelming. And I walk into those classrooms and I am just visually overstimulated.
Mm-hmm.
There is so much happening around me that there is so little chance that I will actually be able to focus on whatever the teacher in the classroom is trying to actually teach, because there's just too much else going on. So the way that a teacher lays out and decorates his or her classroom is so important. Your decorations don't need to cover the walls. It's okay to have some bare wall exposed, and it can be much more calming for students to have just some neutral wall. The decorations that you do put up should usually be ones that are related to whatever you're teaching. So when students' eyes are going to wander away from you, they're wandering to a lovely painting about a historical concept that you teach, or it's drawn to a very tailored amount of either anchor charts or a portion of your chalkboard or whiteboard that's dedicated to a particular subject with the key things that you're currently studying. So all of your decor should be helping draw the students into that pursuit of learning and remembering what they've studied or where they're going to go. The arrangement of your classroom should be one that's going to help your students be able to direct their focus on you and onto each other. So, in classical schools, we typically don't have kind of the pod arrangement of seats. They're facing forward towards the teacher because the teacher, again, is the guide that's going to help the students. Now, sometimes they're going to move around. I'll have students, if they're working on a science experiment, some of them might flip their chairs to face the other way so that they can all look at an experiment together. But then we're always going to come back to that whole group discussion, and we're going to be facing forward and talking about our concept together.
When it comes to a well-ordered classroom, what are some important precedents for a teacher to set during that first week of class?
Oh man, the first week of class is just so important. And it's such a terrifying week for teachers, especially new teachers. Even for me, we always have the stress dreams before school starts of, oh my gosh, do I remember how to do this? But it is such an important week. And the reality is it's not just the first week, it's the thought that goes into before the first week. As a teacher, in order to keep that pursuit of learning the main focus, you have to have your procedures so well set, because students need to know that they're in an organized, ordered space, and they don't need to worry about anything else besides learning. And they have to see that you as a teacher are someone that they can trust to take care of all of the other pieces for them so that they don't have to worry about it. So you have to think through literally every moment of the day of what your students are going to be doing and have some sort of precedent for that. What is it going to look like for students to pass in and out papers so we don't spend 20 minutes every day wasting time in passing of papers? When are students going to be allowed to sharpen their pencils? Because they need to have sharp pencils, but you probably don't want them grinding their pencils down in the back of your classroom while you're trying to teach something and having that noise and distraction. So when is that going to happen? There are so many little things to think about. And then with that, kind of back to the setting up of the classroom piece, there's a lot to think about where to put certain things in your classroom in order to help that flow go really well. I remember my first year of teaching, I thought that I had thought through everything so well. And I was going to greet my students with a handshake at the door. They were going to walk in, and then right inside the front door was going to be where my pencils were, so they could grab their pencils and then move straight to their lockers. And I thought this was going to be great. And then day one happened, and students stood there for minutes choosing which pencil they thought was the best looking. And we had this massive traffic jam because my pencils are right inside the door. And I thought that I had been so well planned, and it ended up totally backfiring, and I had to rearrange things. So it really, there's so much thought that needs to get put into your procedures. And then during that first week, your content is simply a vehicle for practicing your procedures. Students need to be clearly told what the expectations are and then given the opportunity to practice. Just like everything else, students are not going to remember exactly what they're supposed to do after you explain it one time. So I'm teaching a history lesson and I'm going to use a map because the main goal of that lesson is actually for them to learn how to pass papers in and out. And we're going to do it 5 times in that one history class, because if I can really front load those procedures and my expectations, my students are going to feel much more confident in my leadership. So they're going to be able to relax and focus on the learning. And they're also going to just know what my classroom rules are. And it's going to feel like such a safer space. And I'm not going to have to spend every single day re-explaining what my expectations are because they know and they've practiced.
Yeah. what are some ways for teachers to engage students in their work?
There's a lot of different ways. And I think one of the biggest ones comes down to how you approach your lesson planning. When I first started teaching, again, there was a lot of me talking at my students because I felt I'm the one who knows the knowledge. If I say the words, they will learn the words and we will all then know them. But what I've learned is that, first of all, that can be very boring for students. Even if you can tell a really lively story, if you're just telling a really lively story for 45 minutes, that story is still going to get old and they're not going to be able to stay with you. It also is too much information all at once. Students need to have time to really kind of think through and process what you've taught them and have some time to do some work with each point. So what I've learned and kind of what I've been taught by other teachers that I've worked with that are my mentors is the best way to approach a lesson is to think about it in terms of threes. In every lesson, I will have 3 main chunks of content that I want to cover. And then within each of those 3 chunks, I will have kind of 3 smaller components in which to teach each chunk. So first, I'm going to start with some way of instructing my students on the concept. That might mean me telling a story. That might mean us reading something out of a book. That might mean I pass out a map and we examine it and we talk about the different locations. Then next step is I give my students some time to process what we've talked about. I'll give them some sort of note-taking activity. We'll do a Venn diagram to compare and contrast the characters we just talked about. We'll take fill-in-the-blank notes so they can think about and reflect on the key details that we've shared. And then we'll have a whole group discussion. So then that's my opportunity to kind of take that content and press it a little bit deeper. Once my students have had time to hear it and to really digest it, they'll be much better able to then actually have a better, richer conversation about it to understand why that information is important to what we're learning.
Jenny Mulvey is with us, 4th grade teacher at Golden View Classical Academy, talking today about how to maintain a rich and well-ordered classroom. I think you might have even used this word earlier in our conversation. Your classroom's not rambunctious, right? So how can a teacher reset a classroom that might be getting too rambunctious or a little unfocused? And how do you do that, maintain discipline in the well-ordered classroom without stifling some of the curiosity the students might have?
Yeah, and that happens to every teacher. That will always happen to me where the energy starts to grow a little too much.
Yeah,
I think there's a couple of things. One is to not do what I did my first year of teaching, which was to start letting the recess minute consequences fly.
So you had more than one mistake, not just the pencils.
There were so many mistakes the first year. And this is, if you talk to any seasoned teacher and they look back on their first year, they're like, oh yeah, ooh, year one, it's a rough time. So for any first year teachers out there, we have all been there. So when I used to have students that would act up, it was just an immediate consequence. And the issue with that is if all that you do in response to students not doing what you're asking is to just immediately move to punishment, is they will start to stop caring about you and they will stop caring about what they're learning. The most important thing to do to help maintain that classroom decorum, and you will hear this from every teacher, is to build relationships. And it sounds so cliche to say, but it's a cliche because it is the most true thing. Students will care so much more about what you're asking them to do, about corrections you have to make, if they know that you know them and you care about them. Mm-hmm. If someone just comes up to you on the street and makes a correction of you, you're going to feel your bristles are going to be up. You're going to react really poorly to that, and you're probably not going to value what they say because you feel like, well, how can you correct me because you don't know anything about me? Building relationships with students is going to be your best key for being able to make one correction and have it really stick, because they know that you know them and they know that you're not correcting them because you hate them or you're doing it from a place of anger. They know that you're doing it from a place of love because you know that they can do better and you know they have so much potential in them. So that is always, always the first step. Beyond that, if you have a class that's growing rambunctious, there's a couple of things to consider. One is, this might not actually be the student's fault. It might be yours as the teacher of having a breakdown in your procedures. So if you start having a situation where, you ask students to grab something out of their desk and everyone starts turning to chatter, well, that means that your procedure has broken down. So that's that's really not on the students necessarily. It's on you. So in that moment, you should take a whole class reset. Okay, class, we practiced this, but we've clearly forgotten. Let's practice this a couple of times. And it's not punitive. It's reminding. This is how this goes. And the reason for this is because I want us to be able to get on to the next exciting thing we're going to do. I don't want you to be late for your breaks and your recesses. This is an important thing to just keep our class moving along. So reset your procedures. Something else to consider is you're teaching children, and you need to understand what their needs are being young children. A young child cannot sit for 2 straight hours without a break. I, as an adult, cannot sit for 2 straight hours without a break. So if you have several classes that are back to back, you have a really long class period, you need to recognize your students' needs. Give them a 5-minute stretch break between class. If you have a class that's kind of lagging because it's February and it's dark and everyone's tired and everyone's energy is down, try having your class stand up out of their chairs. Just try standing for a little bit. Get the blood flowing. Maybe take a minute in class and have everyone do some jumping jacks. If you have students that you hand out some materials and immediately become a toy, maybe try explaining and giving very clear explanation of what you want the students to do with materials. Show them how the materials work by you modeling them before you give them into the students' hands. Because let me tell you, if I were a little 9-year-old student that got some wires and light bulbs and batteries and I got to build a circuit, as soon as those are in my hands, I want to start investigating with them.
Right.
And that's actually, in fact, exactly what I want them to do, because that's showing that they're wondering, it's showing that they care, but they don't quite have enough precedence to know what to do with them yet. So don't give it to them until they know what you're expecting them to do with it. So think about your students' needs and think about whether this really is naughtiness or whether it's just kind of a little bit of a breakdown. We just need a reset.
Are there opportunities for you, the teacher, to model the order, the virtue in ways that students will want to imitate?
Oh, it's the most essential thing for you as a teacher to model your expectations, but also model this curiosity that you want your students to have. Because again, my goal and what a well-ordered classroom should look like is students trying to pursue some new understanding. And this can be a really easy thing because especially little children are so naturally curious. Mm-hmm. They are naturally disposed to wonder about things. But sometimes you have to show them how and why they can wonder about certain subjects that you teach. Because some students may not know why they should care about grammar or why they should care about bar modeling in math. And these things are so useful. They're so inherently beautiful. They're so interesting, but your students may not know how or why. So you as a teacher need to explain that to them. You need to explain, look, when we did this bar model that you really didn't want to do, you took this really overwhelming word problem and you made it so much simpler and so much easier to understand because now it's a picture that you can visualize. That's why I'm having you do this. I'm having you learn how to make beautiful sentences in grammar and composition because when we read this literature book, I'm going to point out this passage that has some of those grammatical elements and talk about why that made that so much more beautiful. I'm going to laugh when a character in a literature story does something funny or cry when a character experiences immense growth because that shows students that these stories can be really interesting and can be really moving. So you absolutely, as a teacher, have to show them why you care, because if you act bored, they will assume this is a boring thing.
What about school leadership and perhaps other faculty? What role can they play in what happens inside your classroom?
Students will recognize if your classroom is an island that is different from the whole. In order to make this pursuit of learning something new, something that your students will naturally tend towards doing, they have to see that everyone else is doing it too. Because otherwise they might think, well, you're just the weird teacher that's doing something different. And now I'm feeling weird because everyone else, students are very aware when they're different than other people. So there's a whole school culture about this that needs to be set. And it needs to be set by teachers all being together in this and talking through how they do procedures and things. There can be some consistency, and not that every teacher should do everything the same way, because every teacher is different. And that's part of the joy of moving to a new classroom is students get a new experience. Every teacher has their own gifts and their own way of presenting things, which is great. But having some consistency and having that same goal in mind That mindset is so important. And, good school leaders will help to cultivate that. They'll help talk that through. They'll help show teachers how they can do those things. And, teachers modeling this for the students outside the classroom is what's going to show the students how this should look. How you talk to your students when you have to have, a correcting conversation. They're going to talk to their friends like this too. So if you talk to them in a place of care and respect, that's going to model for them how to have those kinds of conversations. If you have two faculty members that are standing and discussing a book that they're reading in the hallway as adults, students will see, oh, wow, people talk about books not just because it's a class requirement that they're getting graded on. Like, this is something that these adults that I've learned to look up to and want to emulate. This is something that they care about just in their life. Mm-hmm. There's so much that the faculty and the administration can do to just set that tenor and that culture in the school.
And then finally, Jenny Mulvey, how can teachers provide a greater richness to what you teach?
I think that comes back a lot to thinking about your lesson plans. And I kind of talked about the way of structuring it for students to be able to digest the material and to learn it better. But I think considering especially how you present the content is really important to help gain that richness. We in classical schools really want to emulate Socrates, who taught pretty much entirely just by asking questions. And students will get really excited if they are able to learn something by piecing together things that you have given them, not by you specifically and directly telling them necessarily. Mm-hmm. And sometimes that has to happen. But the more that you can put the burden of figuring things out on the students and give them the tools to do that, the more exciting and enriching that lesson will be. So for example, I teach about the American Revolution. And so when I teach about the Battle of Yorktown, the battle that ends the war and causes America's victory, a huge component of that victory came because of the location of Yorktown. So instead of telling the students about all the features of Yorktown and why geographically this was so beneficial, I will instead hand my students a map of the location of Yorktown. And I will tell them, there's something about this location that's the reason the Americans won. What do you think it is? And then it's like a puzzle. And then it's a mystery. And then they get to try to figure it out, and they'll talk together and they'll listen and they'll discuss. And then we'll add a little bit more pieces by reading or by me telling them things until eventually we come to the understanding of, oh my gosh, it's the river. And the British had all these expectations of why the river would be so helpful. And actually it ended up totally backfiring and being the reason that they lost. And by giving them those pieces, giving them math manipulatives, giving them different science experiments, giving them different things that they can look at and puzzle through, giving them just enough for them to be able to wrestle with it, and you can guide them through questions to the conclusion, that's going to make that lesson so much more exciting for the students, because now it's a mystery that they get to solve versus them passively just listening.
Jenny Mulvey is fourth grade teacher at Golden View Classical Academy in Colorado. She's also worked with Hillsdale's K-12 office in a variety of capacities, talking today about how to maintain a rich and well-ordered classroom. Jenny, thank you for joining us here on the Hillsdale College K-12 Classical Education Podcast.
Thank you so much.
I'm Scot Bertram. We invite you to like us on Facebook. Search for Hillsdale College K-12 Classical Education. You also can follow us on Instagram at Hillsdale_K12. That's Hillsdale_K12 on Instagram. Thank you for listening to the Hillsdale College K-12 Classical Education Podcast, part of the Hillsdale College Podcast Network. More at podcast.hillsdale.edu or wherever you get your audio.